What's the purpose of my life? Why am I here? Where can I find peace? Where can I find unconditional love? What's a good life? What's a life worth living? Why should I live and not just die? See, these are basic questions, core questions, yet very deep questions. See, they're questions that linger around in all of our conscience and our subconscious. And depending on where you turn and who you look to, who you talk to, will determine the answer you get to those questions. It's a lot of voices in our own heads and in our society around us trying to answer those. I was reading a couple of those voices this week, a couple of articles. One was titled, Liberal Parents, Radical Kids. So all they're just pointing out is there's the baby boomer generation, kind of in the liberal realm, was the thought that we have really good structures, economic structures, political structures, social structures. We just need to have the right people in place. Let's trust the system, put people in place. And if we kind of work together on this, we'll slowly kind of move the ball down the field. Decades have gone by, and another generation, the kids of these same parents, they don't see the change. And so this one journalist, he says they kind of prescribe more the younger generation, maybe 35 and under, prescribe to more of what you might call a cultural Marxism. All that means is the systems are bad. We need to get rid of them, do away with them because they're oppressive systems. But either side's trying to answer fundamental questions. How do I find a society that's worth living in? How do I find my place? What's the answer? I want to find, where's love? Where can peace be found? Maybe we can find it through the systems and the people. Another article I read was a gentleman's about to go through a sex change, and he said, but it won't make me happy. But it shouldn't prevent me from getting it. He's saying the reason is because even once I have the sex change, it won't fulfill all those years that I lost growing up as a little boy when I felt like I should have been a little girl. This is still a decision. These are large kind of buckets, if you will, of how do I find peace? How do I find purpose? Where do I fit in this world around me? Maybe one more voice is a newer voice maybe. Not in history, but maybe for our society. And that is really, there is no meaning in this world. You just make it for yourself. It comes from a French philosopher, Alberto Camus, about 40, 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And he said, really, the biggest question is, he said, life is absurd. He said, the idea, there is no meaning in life, but we keep trying to find meaning. He said, the biggest problem we have is really, the biggest question we have to answer is, why should we live and not just die? And the only answer he had is, just be a rebel. Life is set up to be meaningless, which means if it's meaningless, you ought to just die, but don't do that, just be a rebel. All of these, though, if you bring them together, they're all voices trying to answer these fundamental questions. And the common denominator within them is human ingenuity, my effort, maybe some kind of a human strength. If I do certain things, if I take certain actions, make certain decisions, maybe I will be able to find the answer of why am I here? Can I find peace? Can I find love? Can I find a life worth living? A society worth being a part of? In a very real way, these underlying questions are even at the heart of the problem that we're going to be seeing right here as we're getting into our text this morning. So if you've been with us any amount of time over the past couple of months, you know we've been marching through the second letter to the Corinthians, and we'll be close to be finishing up our Be Reconciled series. But we've been going through chapters 11 and 12 this morning. And as we start in chapter 11, I think we're going to find the reason. I think this is the reason Paul wrote this letter. And I'll point it out to you. And as we get into chapter 12, I think we'll actually find the answer to the questions that we all ask fundamentally. I'm going to start in verse 2 and I'm going to read through verse 4 of chapter 11. It says, "For I, Paul, am jealous for you with a godly jealousy, because I have promised you in marriage to one husband, to present a pure virgin to Christ. But I fear that as the serpent deceived Eve by his cunning, Your minds may be seduced from a sincere and pure devotion to Christ. For if a person comes and preaches another Jesus, whom we did not preach, or you receive a different spirit which you had not received, or a different gospel which you had not accepted, you put up with it splendidly. Verse 3 is the reason I think Paul wrote this. He's saying, I want more than anything for you to have a pure and sincere devotion to Christ. But it seems to me that you're starting to listen to other voices. When I came, it seems like maybe it's a little bit of tough. It took me some years to actually get this church in order. But all of a sudden now some folks come in and you just listen without any skepticism. You put up with it splendidly. They tell you everything that's different from what I said, but you just swallow it hook, line, and sinker. So one of the questions for us to ask is, why were the Corinthians maybe starting to turn or listen to different voices? That's the same reason we all do. Because we all commit the original sin of our parents, Adam and Eve. We all eat the fruit because we all have the same question. Is meaning, is purpose, is joy, fullness of life, reason for living, is it found in Jesus, or is there another way? Is there a better way? That voice is in there. Is the gospel that Paul has put forth, is this really the one? Is there a better way? Because I tell you what, these words that these people, these super apostles that Paul calls them, that they're speaking, man, it's like verbal fruit. It looks really good hanging on that tree. It's nice. Because what's happening right here is we got out of chapter 10, we're going into chapter 11. There's really a compare and contrast with Paul looks weak. His physical appearance is kind of weak. He's kind of scrawny. He doesn't speak all that well. There's just this idea of weakness. And we all have an affinity for strength. Strong. And these folks are coming in, these super apostles. They speak really well. They probably present themselves very well. They look like a leader. I like that. I'm drawn to that. And so really when Paul's saying another Jesus, it's like, Paul, when I look at your disposition, but even this Jesus you tell me about, this gospel that you tell me about, even the lifestyle that you've lived, it just doesn't look as appealing. It looks weak. It looks like you're losing. They look like they're winning. I want to win. So therefore, now is when my bent is, this question starts to come into my mind that is common to them, that's common to our parents way back when, it's common to us. Is this really the way? Is there a better way? So as we're going to see for the rest of chapter 11 into the beginning of chapter 12, Paul's going to try to push back against some of these assumptions that they're making. Also, he's going to show them his devotion, and also even just start to boast a little bit, show his own resume, all for the purpose of, he says, I want you to listen to me. I'm trying to get your ear. You're listening to all these other voices now. Would you at least still listen to mine? I'm going to give you a reason to listen to my voice. So as he starts off, he says, yeah, I'll hand it off to you. They probably do speak better, and they maybe look better than I do. But I'm not lacking in knowledge. They don't have any more knowledge. And the reason this is important, he's just saying everything I've told you about Jesus, this gospel, this lifestyle, is true. Trust me. What I'm telling you is true. I'm not lying to you. They are. He's saying my devotion has shown this. I haven't come so you'd worship me. I've come to push you to Jesus. These people's they just want you to look at them. That's the end goal of strength at the end of the day. Look at me. He says part of this, we can't be surprised. It's because Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So he's saying, I want you to be careful. It seems to me that you guys are starting to fall into the same trap that our parents did. Satan came along, and our first parents had everything. You had what you needed. You had this privilege, this amazing gift, and that is God was your father. And Satan said, but that's not enough. You can have something better. There's a better news. There's a better gospel than what God the Father has given you. Bypass him, take it yourself. And he says, I'm fearing that that's what you're starting to do. So my devotion has shown that I'm for you. I want to push you back to this devotion. Then he goes through, starts to show his resume, what he's done, what he's suffered. But at the end of chapter 11, as he gets into chapter 12, he starts to make a little bit of a shift. Because he's saying you're making this contrast between what appears strong and what appears weak. And to this point, I've showed you a little bit of my so-called strength. But I'm not going to go with that anymore. Because that's not true strength. I'm going to go with weakness. Because in the economy of God, it's a paradox. When you're weak, there is strength. And then he's going to show us what that means. So he starts in chapter 12, verse 1. He says, boasting is necessary, it's just not profitable. Saying everything I've told you thus far sounds like a boast. It's true, it's just not going to help you out. It's sort of like if I was in the job hunt, I'm going around, I'm trying to look for a job, and I want to go and talk to someone, and I come across a gentleman, and I'm saying, hey, how'd you go about finding the job? He said, well, as a graduate of Harvard, we have a really strong alumni network, and it's just never been very difficult for me to find a job. What good's that going to do me? Great. It's true. What good does that do me? He's made a boast. It just doesn't affect me at all. Right? It's not profitable for me. Basically, what he would be saying is, well, if you're like me and you had a graduate, you'd have this network and then you would have a job as well. You don't, sorry for you. So that's what he's saying here is he goes in these past statements, even right here he's about to go into visions that he's seen. He said, I'll tell you about it. I'm going to boast about it just because it seems that's the only people you listen to is people kind of brag on themselves. But it's not going to be helpful for you. I can tell you about how I suffered for Jesus. I can tell you about the churches I planted. I can even tell you about the sheer fact that I was taken up to the third heaven, saw King Jesus himself. It's not going to do you any good. Because it doesn't all of a sudden now whip you up into the third heavens just because I did it. And so as he gets in here into chapter 12, he starts to say, I knew a man. Get into verse 7, you see that man is Paul because he talks about himself. But the point is he's trying to make a little bit of distance between himself, between his experience and what he's trying to get at them, because he's saying, my objective is not for you to look at me. I'm coming to you, the purpose I've been writing to you is for your pure devotion to Jesus. I'm trying to point you to him. These other people are pointing you to themselves, so I don't want to do the same thing. I'm going to distance myself from that. So we come down to verse 7. It says, therefore, so that I, Paul, would not exalt myself, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to torment me, so that I would not exalt myself. So first, let's just see here. What's the purpose of don't exalt yourself. You need to be brought lower. So I have a colleague and a friend who remain nameless, but there's not a whole lot of distance between the top of her head and the ground. So the majority of people that she speaks to, she's looking up. For me, there's a little bit more distance between the top of my head and the ground, so the majority of people I speak with, I'm looking down. But I would say she has a greater perspective. Because not only because she's typically having to look up, she not only sees people's heads, but what's on top, what's above. For me, as I'm looking down, there's half the world I don't even see. There's a greater perspective. So as I'm exalted, I like height, I'm grateful to have it. But in this kind of metaphor, as I exalt myself, my perspective has gotten more narrow. I don't see as clearly. I don't see as far. So Paul's part of these, if we're starting to get closer to some of the answers to these questions. And part of it has to be doing with kind of being lowered. Because Paul, to this point, we can see his resume, we can see these visions he's had, and to a degree, it could actually exalt him. Large. Look at me. You could be like me. Your life would be better off. Your relationship with Jesus would be better if you were just more like me. But the larger we get in our mind's eye, less likely are to see our weaknesses because we just end up comparing ourselves with everybody else. I don't have the same errors you do, so therefore I must be stronger. So he said to prevent this, God has given me thorns, hindrances. Now some commentators think that this is just a physical malady because they said if it's really a sin, Paul would have prayed more than 3 times because you don't want to live with sin. I don't think that's really accurate, actually. We don't know. I think it's ambiguous for a reason. But I think just that line of reasoning is not true. It could be that you have a temptation to sin that just won't leave you. It doesn't mean that you necessarily have to sin in it. It's just always there nagging you. It's a thorn. I can't get rid of it. You have a tendency to gossip. You have a tendency to look at other people for your approval. You have a tendency towards pride. You have a tendency towards lust. It won't leave, right? He's saying the purpose of this thorn, it is meant to turn us to Jesus. It's meant to lower us till we see we have a weakness here. Old Puritan writer John Owen, he's in kind of depicting this scene. He pictures a man who's praying to God and he says, God, just take this away from me. And God says, no, because if I take this away, I'll never see you again. We'd all say, oh, we got plenty of sins, but we usually have a bosom sin, something that just won't leave us. And that gets all of our attention. We think, if I just got past this, I'd be fine. And we'd be gone. So in some sense, that thorn is there to remind you, you have a need. You have a need. So now we see Paul's reasonings, he's starting to kind of come in strength, weakness. It's getting a little bit more clear. So he said, concerning this, I pleaded 3 times with the Lord. Please take it from me. But the Lord said, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is perfected in weakness. One thing I want to look at just here. So in the original language, you have my grace is sufficient for you. My power, the my next to power is not there. Why is this important? Okay, 2 main subjects in here, grace and power. I think that those are interchangeable, really. Grace is power. What is grace? Grace is unmerited favor. It's a gift to you that we did not deserve. At the end of the day, what grace really is, it is the triune God himself saying, here I am. I give myself to you. And if this is what it is, grace, because it's saying it's an unmerited gift to you, it indicates you have a need. Then I think this makes sense because it's only going to be filled up. It's only going to be completed in weakness. If you think you're really good, if you're really strong, you don't have a need. If you don't have a need, you don't need grace. This is the reason we shouldn't actually be surprised that there's a lot of good people out there who are atheist, agnostic, and they won't come darken the church's doorstep. I mean, what? They're good people. They do good things. You know, they're thorns. Maybe they're there, but it's just not they don't look as big as y'all's and mine. So it just doesn't get the attention. I don't see my need. So why would I need Jesus? Everything's intact. So this is the point. He's saying, I have a need here. As I'm lowered, I start to see my need, and I'm going to get more of God. We're getting closer here to our questions. He says, therefore, I will most gladly boast all the more about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may reside in me. Now, here's an interesting word, the word reside right here. Compound word could be broken down like this: upon tent or upon tabernacle. That's what the word literally means there, if you break it down. So I started to think, it's like, man, what is this, Lord? What is this? Why this word? It's like what the Lord kind of brought to my mind. I go to the end of Exodus. Exodus 40, you have the tent. It's been built, this tabernacle. And at the end, you see God himself comes down and is upon this tent. As you know, if you're familiar with the text, Moses, he will go into this tent that God is on top of. He's upon this tent, this tabernacle. And Moses goes in there to meet with God so he can lead God's people. And the Bible says that Moses was the meekest man alive. One of the ways that Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones defines meekness is he says it's having a proper view of yourself and a proper view of others. If you look at the Beatitudes, blessed are the poor in spirit, they be comforted. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the poor in spirit, theirs is the kingdom of God. Blessed are those who mourn, they'll be comforted. And then, blessed are the meek, they'll inherit the earth. And he says those build upon one another. If you're poor in spirit, you grieve your sin, like you recognize you have a need. You will mourn your sin. If you mourn your sin, you'll be meek. You'll have a proper view of yourself. You won't think too little of yourself. You won't think too high. You have a proper view of yourself. And so Moses, being one who's meek, has a proper view of himself. So he has a need. So he's always going back to this tent. I'm always going back to the presence of God. I need him. I have a need. He's going to meet it. And as you know, when he comes out of the tent, he has a little bit of the lingering effects of God. Well, I think this is what Paul's actually getting at. He said, in my weakness, God shows me my weakness with this thorn. It now drives me. It's meant the purpose of the thorn is to drive me to Jesus. And if that be the case, then all of a sudden, Jesus, will tent or tabernacle on top of me, on me. Here's why this is important. This starts to actually get to the core of our questions. Why am I here? What's the purpose of my life? Where can I find peace? Where can I find love? Because as other voices we have, as I gave examples of earlier, It's all human effort or ingenuity or a system. This is now saying, as I turn to him, I actually get the answer itself. It's God himself. He's the one I'm looking for. He actually answers all the questions that I need. As he dwells upon me in my weakness, God is the one that fills me up. So the initial point is I need to be reconciled to God myself. That's what I get. The initial contact point is every single time I see my weakness, this thorn is here, it drives me back to God. I get reconciled to him. And if you have relationships, friendships, siblings, married couples, you know you can have squabbles. And it kind of breaks the relationship. You need to reconcile. Depending on your level of, or your propensity for conflict, it may be once a year, once a month, maybe several times a week. Depends on how God has made you. Nevertheless, every time that happens, you have to come back together to be reconciled. And this is what it is. Every time there is a sin, every time there's a temptation, every time there's a need, you see it, we turn back and I'm reconciled to him. This is what we're looking for. This is starting to answer my question. This is the voice we have to listen to. This is why Paul is pleading with him. He says, there's not another voice out there that you're actually going to find the deepest answers to your questions. Not one of them. This is the voice you have to listen to. Because it is God who knows you. He is the Prince of Peace. He is love itself. When you turn to him, further as you do this, as it starts to go into verse 10, Paul says, so I take pleasure in weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions. Also part of the hardships even can be public humiliations, difficulties for the sake of Christ. For when I'm weak, then I'm powerful. Because it's him. It's part of this, as I turn back and I'm reconciled to him, now all of a sudden I can begin to live out what Paul said back in 2 Corinthians 5:20. And that is, in Christ, through Christ, God is making his appeal through us to the world around us. He's trying to reconcile the world around us. Everyone has these questions. Where are they going to find answers? Where are they going to find peace? Where are they going to find love? Where are they going to find the reason to live and not die? It's Jesus. And as you submit to him, as you turn back to him, and you're reconciled, now you're driven out to be a reconciler. This is the answer. So I'll tell you what, verse 10, if you're doing it in your strength, everybody has a different threshold, patience. But eventually there's going to be a point where insults, hardships, persecutions, you don't have the capacity to rejoice in those. You're going to revolt against those. Example. So I play basketball on Monday nights. Probably shouldn't, got bad knees, but I do anyway. But this is also, we kind of think about intersection. And so I get my exercise in, I play, but this is also, I feel like this is the opportunity where the majority of the people I pray through for my Jerusalem 5, they're there. So, a couple of weeks ago, playing hoops, guy fouls me. Well, I'm between breaths, so it takes about a second or two to say, hey, that was a foul. Well, if you play, if you know what this means, usually if you delay, people think that, oh, it wasn't really a foul. You just lost the ball and you want to call a foul now. You know? So I was like, no. So I said, no, I was between breaths. And he says, you're lying. Oh, okay. All right. So then I'm trying to be cordial. It's like, hey, just, want to talk to you. Hey, man, I was between breaths. That's the reason. It was a foul. I mean, I wasn't trying to delay. I'm not going to lie out here. There's no scouts out here. I'm 34. I mean, come on, man. Who's going to recruit me? You know what I'm saying? Because I'm going to contract waiting to me on the other side, So, and he's like, no, you lied. You're a liar. Ooh. That was hard. I had some thoughts. We'll leave it at that. I had some thoughts. So I'm looking at this guy. I'm like, I could do something, you know what I'm saying? So right there, instantly, I have a decision to make. Am I going to act out of my strength, out of my weakness? My strength says you guard your honor, your respect. He's insulted me in front of multiple people, and I don't like that. So I can do whatever I need to do to make sure he doesn't do that again. Weakness says, turn the other cheek. Yeah, you didn't lie in that. He called you a liar. But think how many times in your actions and your deeds you call me a liar, and I am not a liar. Only reason I'm actually able to be at that spot is because I've been reminded over and over. I have a little bit of a competitive streak at times. Not very often. Maybe. Depends on who you ask. And I know that sports, performance like that, has some kind of influence on who I think I am. And so it can lead me to act in ways that I should not act. Like 2 years ago now, as you know, we've done the kickball, blueprint kickball for the past 2 summers. 2 summers ago, I sinned. And I think the only person to know was my wife, and she said, "You sinned." And I was like, "I did." And so this past summer, we're playing, and Lee Jensen's talking trash to me as he's rolling the ball down. And I gave him a cheeky comment. It was not sin, actually. But I still felt bad because, I got to guard myself. I got to be, because I know what So I go around and I apologize to him. I was like, "Hey, man, I wasn't trying to be cheeky." He's like, "Oh, I was trying to be cheeky." It's like, "Hey, that's fine. I'm just trying not to sin this year, man." It's like, I just want to get out of this. No, I didn't sin against God. But it's like I have to have that perspective when I go in to play hoops because I know me. I've shown my backside numerous times. I just don't want to do it again. And the reason this was beautiful is because, in one way, because I acknowledge my weakness, I know I can respond in a godless way. But because God now enabled me to, in my weakness, I turned to him in a very real way. This gentleman, he got Jesus. He got the kindness of God. Even if it was just in turning the other cheek. Further, there was another gentleman who was there who's been on my heart for a while to share the gospel with, who afterwards we got into a conversation. He said, "Hey, I'd like to learn more about this. I don't believe in God. I don't think that's true, but I like what you're saying." That opportunity would not have taken place had I acted out of my strength. I would have completely ruined it. "Oh, you're the guy? You just bombed that guy over there, So this is the key. This is what we're looking for, my belonging. It's not a system. It's not human effort. Those help. They can bring a change. They can bring a change in your own heart. If you're lazy, you need to learn from someone who's, works hard. But it doesn't answer the core questions. Your sense of belonging, your sense of need, sense to have peace, love. Why am I here? What gives us purpose? It's only found in Jesus, only him. He's made us. He knows what we're here for. We have to use this thorn, not despise the thorn. On this side of life, this is what we got. We're in a broken world, and we're broken people. There's brokenness in my heart, and it comes out through my hands. I contribute to the brokenness in this world. So I have to respond to these thorns, to turn to him, to be reconciled to him. As I do that, now all of a sudden he is on me, he's in me. So the people I respond to, now there's an opportunity for them to be reconciled to the questions that they're longing for, because they get him. There's one of my favorite books by C.S. Lewis. It's called Till We Have Faces. And there's this woman in there, Oriole, not a very pretty name. I think it's supposed to make it that way because she's presented as not a very pretty person. Well, she's always looked over. Her younger sister's the more beautiful one. Dad and mom always love her younger sister. Then her mother dies, and her father marries another man, another woman. So, marries another woman. And then they have a child, and this child's actually is a goddess. She's beautiful, but she's also very loving. She's very warm. She loves Oriole, pays attention to her, there for her. Well, one day, it happens that the gods are upset and they have to sacrifice. Psyche has done something, that's the stepdaughter's name, that she's done something wrong. And so she has to be sacrificed to appease the god. What happens, and then for the rest of Oriole's life, she becomes queen. She's very powerful. She's very wise. People search from all over the world to come and see her. But all along, she's still longing. She says, "No one's ever loved me. Psyche loved me." She needed purpose. She's still, even though I have everything together, why is this life worth living? So she goes on a quest to try to find this God and determines, he's going to hear, I'm going to give him a piece of my mind. I want my sister back. I want the one who loved me back. So she goes through Hades and all these sort of things. And finally she comes up to the court and she's about to meet this God. And it says the God comes around the corner, and all of a sudden it just says she just drops to the ground in worship. And the point was is that every single question, every single complaint, every single desire she had, there didn't need to be a word stated. It was just his presence. Him. That was it. I didn't need to say anything. Whatever comes out of that God's mouth, it's right. This is what we're presenting. This is what Jesus presents to us. This is the gift we don't deserve. Every question that we have, every concern we have, every need we have, doesn't even have to be said. It's just him. This is what the world longs for. We want to see a reconciliation. People want to see unity. They want to see a togetherness. It's not, systems can help, but they will not bring it ultimately. It is him. So for us, so I'm sure for many of you, like I myself, you have these weaknesses. You see these thorns. You have a need. You wish you were more. You wish you were enough. Things that continue to nag you. It's like, there's a story in the Old Testament in Numbers how Israel, they're complaining against God again. They're saying, hey, I wish I was still enslaved so finally I could eat something beside this nappy bread here. And so finally he sends some snakes and they start biting and people are dying. God tells Moses that here's what you're going to do. You're going to go and you're going to make a little copper snake. You're going to put it on a post and you're going to hold it up. Say, anyone who looks here, they're going to be healed. But you can imagine if you're in that state, you've just been bitten, your swollen legs, pus coming out. It's like, I'm dying here. Well, just looking at it's not going to do you any good. You can keep on looking, you're just going to die there. You eventually have to do something different. And the thing that the snake was a curse. So when they put it on this post, it's symbolic of a curse. So if you will look to the curse, you will be healed. This is obviously symbolic of Jesus saying, I will be the curse for you. You live cursed lives. I live cursed life. I became a curse for you. Look at me. I'm looking for something. What do I find in Jesus? He says, come to me all who are heavy and weary laden. I'll give you rest. Anybody heavy in here? You tired? Tired of trying to be enough? Tired of trying to find peace but it eludes you? Tired of really trying to find love from that person? Just somebody love me. Somebody give me approval and it's just never enough. You're tired. Jesus says, I will be enough. Jesus says, come to me, all those who are thirsty. I'll give you drink. And then living water will bubble out of you. Got some thirsty people. You're thirsting for something. You're thirsting for more. Thirsting for a life worth living. Jesus says, come to me. Isaiah 55 says, hey, you're broke. Doesn't matter. Come without your money. Have some real food. Be built up. This is the offer that we have. This is who we hold out. This is who he's holding himself out to us. This is what grace is. Grace is the triune God. This is the answer to what we need. If you're like me, man, it's like it needs to get into your thick skull, your callous heart. Drowning otherwise. So I ask that you join me. As I pray for you, you pray for me. But that the Lord, we would respond to these thorns that the Lord has given us, that we would not necessarily despise them anymore. They're not to be obviously celebrated, but really see them. That is the tool. This is a kindness of God that he's doing to us. He's saying, you will run away. You love strength, but you are not strong. That's why it's there. So turn to me. And as we do that, we will be reconciled to him. And then may God use us to bring reconciliation to this world. Let's pray.